Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Conversations with Filmmakers podcast. This is part two and the final discussion with Dave Bossert. He is the former visual effects supervisor from Disney. Thanks for joining us. In this industry, it's so small at a certain level, right? So
Yeah.
think about it, Dave. If you leave on bad terms, that person could be the head of another division at the company you're trying to get into. So
Hey,
I've had friends like that where they're like, so and so that we used to work with just came in to interview with my boss, you know? And it's like, ooh, that's not a good thing because you were not nice to people at the last job. So all it would take is you're literally interviewing with that person's boss where they can say, don't hire that guy, you
you
know?
know, it really is a small business when you think about it. And people who display bad behavior,
Mm-hmm.
that gets around really fast. And
Yes.
you can spend years building your reputation and you could just destroy it very quickly. And also, if you get a reputation for being difficult, and there's plenty of actors and all kinds of people in the industry who have gotten those reputations as being difficult, and they have trouble finding work because people say, oh, that person's difficult, I don't want to work with them.
So you
And it's
are
just as
swimming in it.
simple as that. Simple as that.
Yeah, we think it's a really large ocean, but it's more like a smaller lake when it gets to certain levels. So, but let's talk briefly though. You had mentioned the writing that you're doing now, the nonfiction books and everything. Could you speak more on how did you even transition into that and maybe some of the content that you've worked on for that?
Sure.
And what is that process, you know?
Yeah, it was really sort of an interesting an interesting route into writing books, because I never viewed myself as somebody who would be writing books.
Why is that?
It was just one of those things, like, I just never thought about it.
Mhm.
It's like if somebody walked in and said, "Hey, Vonti, I want you to be let's make you an astronaut." You'd be like, "Hey, wait a second. I had never thought about being an astronaut." You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
So it's like same with writing a book. I never
Yes.
thought I would ever write a book, and I had written for a number of years. I had written some commentaries for a local community newspaper, just on community stuff, things
Mhm.
that were going on. And I think I started developing a voice doing that, a writing voice. And then I had a friend. Uh, we met up and we were trading stories about Roy E. Disney, who we had
Mhm.
both worked with and knew very well.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was telling him some stories, and he said to me, "Man," he goes, "you ought to put some of those stories in a book." And we kind of laughed about it, and a couple months later, for whatever reason, I started thinking about that comment, and
Mhm.
I had a meeting drop out on my calendar, so I went on to Amazon on my computer, and I searched for a book on writing a book.
Writing for dummies. Remember that? That's
Really, pretty much. So seriously, and so I got that book, and I remember not even finishing it. I got enough out of it that I wrote an introduction of what the book would be, and I wrote a sample chapter,
Mhm.
and I asked somebody if they knew anybody at the publishing arm of Disney, and they did, and I just did a cold email to the person,
Mhm.
and I sent them the introduction and the sample chapter, and And then I happened to be in New York on business, and the two of us met up at a restaurant in Lower Manhattan.
Dave,
And
that's called networking.
yeah, I guess, but you know, we
Just
we
messing
we
with you.
met, you know,
I'm just teasing you.
we had, you know, we knew each other's names, right? You know, because when I reached out, she knew who I was,
Hmm.
and I had heard her name, but you know, I over lunch, she said to me, you know, we'd like you to do this book, and I was floored. I
You're
really
like, what
was.
is okay? I need to
I you know, I
jot
walked
something.
away going, I'm doing a book, and then I realized, oh my God, I'm doing a book.
Yeah,
I gotta
you're
write
like,
a book. You
I
know?
was about to say, I'm like, you're like, okay, I read Writing for Dummies or whatever, like the intro book to how to write,
Yeah.
but now I got to do a whole book. So
Yeah,
talk.
so I, you know, I wound up you know, doing that, and
Okay,
you know, and I
you're skipping over all the juicy details,
all
right?
right, yeah.
What was that first book, and like what helped to inspire that? Like you mentioned the different stories. I would love for you to share, like for
Yeah.
instance, the
So
monorail story.
all
Give
right,
us
yeah,
the
but
monorail story
all
because
right,
this man
but
has stories for
yeah,
days, and I love it.
so the book really was remembering Roy E. Disney, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And store, you know, it was really, you know, that's the title of the book. And what I wanted to do was to write a book that when a person read it, they felt like they knew who Roy E. Disney was as a human being.
Mm.
Not because his last name was Disney and he, you know, was wealthy and this and that, but really to understand what kind of a person he was. And it
Okay.
was really told through personal experiences and personal stories of traveling with him and with a few other people that I interviewed for it. And you know, and you mentioned the monorail story. I mean, one of the things that you know, I had dinner with Roy at the top of the grand the Contemporary Resort
Mm-hmm.
in Orlando at the California Grill restaurant, which is at the very top. And after dinner, we came down to the monorail platform, which is
Mm-hmm.
inside the Contemporary Resort, and we were going to take the monorail back to our hotel,
Mm-hmm.
which was like one stop away. And uh and you know, here's Roy Disney. He's vice chairman of the company. You know, he could do it.
Billionaire Roy
Yeah,
Disney.
yeah, he could do whatever he wanted, right?
Yeah.
But instead we waited online with everybody else. We didn't jump the queue. We just waited online, and we waited for our turn to get onto the monorail, you know. And that speaks
Powerful.
volumes. It speaks volumes for people that do those kinds of things. You know, he didn't take the name or the privilege or any of that for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, for him to wait online was perfectly natural for him. You know, he felt that was respectful of all the other guests, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And you know, so there was a lot of stories like that, and a lot of travel related stories and funny things. And so I put this collection together after he had passed away, you know.
Wow.
And so that was my first book.
Wow.
And when I turned in that manuscript, I had put together a pitch for another book.
Oh, because you were rocking and rolling now, huh?
Well, I just thought, well, you know, I picked these topics that I really knew a lot about, and so the
Right.
second book was Dolly and Disney Destino, and it was a small short film that Salvador Dali and Walt Disney collaborated on in 1946, and then a
Wow.
small team of us finished it 58 years later in
Wow.
2003. So it was, you know, one of those things where you're like, I really know everything about this, and I worked on it, and I was part of the team to help finish it. So I decided to pitch the idea of putting that whole story from 1946 to the 2003 completion of the project,
Wow. That's amazing.
put that whole story into a book. So I submitted that pitch, and they were like, yeah, we want to do that book. So it was like my second book contract. And at that point I was starting to get a little bit more confidence, and I
Yes,
decided that I would enroll at the UCLA writers program,
nice.
that's part of their UCLA extension.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wound up getting a certificate in creative writing, and I got another certificate in fiction writing. And all of those classes and all the people I met in those classes really helped to boost my writing voice,
Mm-hmm.
my how I was structuring stories, and all of those things. I just learned so much from it. And again, education. It's always about
Yes.
learning. It's whether you're going to take a class online, or if you're going to actually go to a classroom, or whatever it is, you're constantly learning. And what's so great about the technology today and the internet and all of this stuff is that you can pretty much search for anything online that you need to know about, and you can
Mm-hmm.
find a class in it. You could find how to do it. You could find a YouTube video to
Webinars, YouTube. Yeah.
anything, a TED
Mm-hmm.
talk, whatever it is. And
Educate yourself.
yeah, and so it's really about, education doesn't stop when you finish high school or you finish college or graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
Education is a lifelong learning adventure,
Mm-hmm.
and I take classes every year, every year,
That's amazing.
and so I always want to learn something new.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, some of those things will not have a direct connection to what you're doing, but they get your mind going. They get
Mm-hmm.
your mind thinking differently. How is something put together? How do you make something? How do you do these things? And so, a lot of those things that I do outside of the sphere of writing books,
Yes.
those things are constantly swirling through my head and helping me think and look at things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the books that I've chosen to write are topics that haven't been touched on,
I love that.
and
So you make it a unique story. Hi, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. Just so you know, Dave Bossert is actually going to be releasing a visual companion book for The Nightmare Before Christmas. That will be dropping on September 26th. Please check out his website at www.davebossert.com to learn more. Hi there, and welcome back to Conversations with Filmmakers podcast. Let me tell
yeah,
the audience real quick. Thank you for joining us because we are doing conversations with filmmakers with Dave the Bossman. That's going to be your new name, Dave. Dave the Bossman. But I wanted to ask you really quickly to go back to that. Aside from the books, going into the animation part, how did you transition from, what they're doing? Back then, I guess it was like drawing it out, but now they have all these different technologies where you're doing it. When did that happen for you as well? And how were you able to?
well, again, this is about keeping up with advances in your field of expertise.
Absolutely.
So for me, being in the effects department, there was always new techniques and new technologies coming about.
Hmm.
And it was really about not being afraid of that, but embracing it and learning it. And the
Absolutely.
earlier that you learn those things, the better off you're going to be. And frankly, as computer technology started to come into animation,
Hmm.
so it really, there was this decade plus transition from hand drawn to computer generated animation at Disney.
Hmm.
It was over 10 or 12 years of the technology being used incrementally more and more
Hmm.
into the different films, until you hit an inflection point where people say, well, why don't we just do a CG movie, you know?
Yes.
And the fact is that if you kept up on those advances and learned them and developed an aptitude to using those technologies, you just advanced along the way.
Mm-hmm.
The people who just wanted to hold a pencil and draw,
Mm-hmm. Got left behind.
like they had been doing for decades and decades at Disney, those people got left behind and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately were laid off and left the industry because there was no use for them, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Their jobs disappeared and they didn't want to transition using new technology, and that's that those are personal choices. And so the thing I always tell people in college and whatnot, embrace the technology. It's just one more tool in your toolbox.
Absolutely.
And nowadays, honestly, if you want to get into the animation business, you have to have embraced technology. You have to
Mm-hmm.
be adept at working on the computer. You have to be able to use the different software packages to create animation, to create elements that are used in animation. So it's kind of a given now. But
Mm-hmm.
30 years or 20 years ago, it was something I said constantly. It was embrace all the new technology. Change is constant, you know
Absolutely.
and that's what everybody has to realize, is that the one constant in our world, in everything we experience, is change. Everything's changing,
Absolutely.
and it continues to change at an even more rapid pace.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. And can you speak to as well, how was it, for instance, when you were approached to help out with The Nightmare Before Christmas? Because that was a different look and feel as well. That was something that was probably your team had managed, right?
well, no, I mean, that was a completely separate production, but they needed some help.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always known as somebody who, if you came to me and asked me to do something, I always said yes. And the funny thing is, I had, early in my career, I had talked to an artist who'd worked at Disney for like 45 years. and
Wow.
and, and one day I said to him, I go, hey, what's the secret to the longevity? And he looked at me and he said, I always said yes. I go, what do you mean? He goes, anytime somebody came in and asked me if I could do something, I always said, sure, I can do that. And he said, and then when they left my office, he said, oh my God, I got to figure out how to do that. I don't know how to do that, And so he'd go
Yes.
figure it out. And the
Mhm.
funniest thing is, I've seen people, younger people, coming into the workplace. You go up and you say, hey, I want to have you do this. The first thing they're oh, I don't know how to do, I've never done that before.
I
Well,
know,
that's
and that's the
okay.
worst thing you can say. It's the worst.
I'm like, okay, so you haven't done it before, go figure it out,
Go figure it out.
or
Exactly.
go talk to so and so and they'll show you how to do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Be
and
proactive
and
instead of
that's how you
reactive.
learn. Yeah.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
so he said to me, he goes, I always said yes. So I sort of took that as great advice. And so anytime somebody came in and said, hey, could you help so and so on such and such, I'd say, sure, okay, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
And I go do it, and I go figure it out. And Nightmare was a perfect example, because it was 1992, 1993, and they wanted to make it snow in Halloween Town in the movie. There's a
Hmm.
sequence where it snows, and um, the computer software packages didn't really have great, what are known as particle system generators.
Okay.
So the particle system wasn't really where it needed to be in some of the packages that they were using to do rigid body animation or character animation. It hadn't really been developed. So they paired me with a software engineer, a very talented guy named Trin Huang. And
Okay.
Trin was writing the code as I was, working with the director and getting the information on what he wanted to have done. And then I would sit there and I'd work on this early particle system, and then I would say, Trin, we need to be able to do X. And okay, and he would be able to write the code or the software to be able to do that.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it was a team effort, but
Mhm.
it was something that I had never done before, but I was happy to say I'm happy to do that.
Mhm.
I said yes. And so I just had a reputation of being somewhat entrepreneurial, and always, if you came to me and asked me to help or do something, I always said yes,
Absolutely.
and then we go and figure it out, you know.
Absolutely. And I think
And
that's
that
probably why a lot of people would love to, work with you, because you have that openness about yourself, you know?
Yeah, and also I had a knack, and I still do, of simplifying things. I mean, oftentimes a lot of things get overly complicated, and they don't need to be.
Mhm.
There's oftentimes simpler solutions to doing certain things, whatever they are, and I tend to look for, how can we do this the best quality, but also the most efficiently.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to view things that way. You don't have to overly complicate processes.
Which is a very big thing. An
Yeah.
absolutely very big thing. It's like, do not overcomplicate. Now, a message from our sponsors. We are excited to bring you this world exclusive teaser from Bad Rabbit Pictures and Movie Pods. They are presenting Age of Prophecy, a sci fi fantasy podcast done in the style of the radio dramas of yesteryear. Coming soon to all streaming platforms. Visit www.moviepods.com or www.theanoukchronicles.com for all the release dates. You won't want to miss this one. Your myths were born from our history. Let's check it out.
Life. A vile, messy sequence of events before we die. All designed for something beyond us. It has to be. Or else, what's the point? You don't know me, but I know you. I am responsible for your triumphs and miseries. I am Zira and Lilzor, and to truly understand your own story, you must know mine. Your myths were born from my history.
Hi there, and welcome back to Conversations with Filmmakers podcast. We touched on before about like something that you mentioned earlier with the continuing education, right? Doing it all of the time. There's a big thing in Hollywood that all over, I guess, in corporate. Your feelings. I'd love to know your feelings on ageism. Is there an idea on how we can resolve that? I know what I feel could possibly happen, but I would love to get your take on that.
It's interesting. I think, in hindsight, I kind of feel like I left Disney at a really good time,
Mhm.
because I don't want to say I haven't experienced it, but I haven't experienced it to the degree that a
Mhm.
lot of colleagues of mine are experiencing it right now.
Mhm.
There's a lot of folks who their phone isn't ringing the way it used to be.
Mhm.
They're not, some of them have just resigned themselves to retiring,
Oh wow.
and triggering their guild benefits and all of that, because the work isn't coming.
Mhm.
And one story I want to convey, which is really kind of funny, was I have a friend who told me this story. I'm not going to mention his name, but he said he got a call to come in for a job. Right, he was
Mhm.
going to be storyboarding a project, and when he got in, he said, the director and the producers and everything, they're all like young kids.
Yes.
And they were just asking him about, some movies he had worked on, and it was like movies that they had grown up on. Okay.
Mhm.
And he said he thought the interview went really well. He was engaging, telling him about some of the projects he had worked on. And he said, and he didn't get the job. And he said to me, like 4 months later, the same people called him and asked him if he would come in because the person they hired made a mess of the project, and they were now calling him in to fix it.
Craziness.
And I just thought to myself, that is absolute craziness, because why aren't you using somebody who's highly experienced?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, big deal that you're talking to somebody who could probably be your dad,
Mm-hmm.
but why not hire the experienced people? You're going to save money.
You're going to save money. And that
Yeah.
is my biggest thing. It goes back to almost like corporate mentoring, right?
Yeah.
Hiring somebody seasoned. And also it's this misconception of they they're stuck in their ways, right? So you
Yeah.
just plainly said, hey, I get education every single year. I learn something new every single
Yeah.
year. It's this assumption that people, as they get older, are not willing to learn. They're stuck in their ways. They're not going to be flexible. And I think that's the biggest misconception. Even at myself at my age, I'm in my 40s or whatever, I'm not too old or whatever, I don't think anybody's old. I say maybe late 90s and early 100s is old, but I feel like as long as
Vonti, you're a spring chicken.
yeah, exactly. But there has been challenges, because a lot of times the landscape has changed. A
Yeah.
lot of these businesses literally are going directly to the colleges. They have businesses on that they literally have an office space at the college. So they're literally like, once you finish a class, come on and work for us kind of thing, right? So, or they're lowballing those that are older who have made a higher salary than what you're offering. And I'm sorry that, somebody that is used to making six figures, you're now trying to get them to make 45,000 and they're coming with 2 decades of experience. I think, but to get back to my point with the ageism thing, I feel like continuing to learn plays a big part. And I think it is good for cost savings, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
If somebody can do it in 20 minutes and they did it wrong versus the older person that might do it in 45 minutes and it's perfection, which one would you prefer? Also, it provides corporate mentoring.
Yeah.
Get a mix of both. I'm sure with your staff over at Disney, you had young, old, whatever. You know what I mean? It wasn't like the same age range. It was whoever could do the job, right?
Exactly. And you know what, it's always going to be a mix, but I do think that there's a lot of dynamics at play with older workers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they're established, they're getting paid more. If they're if a studio's trying to cut costs, get rid of some of those people, get younger people in who will work for cheaper.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the product suffers. You see money being wasted because things have to be redone because they're not working, or they take much longer than they should to get them to work.
Mm-hmm.
As far as developing stories and things like that, I sit there and look at some of the stuff that's gone on at Disney Animation in recent years,
Mm-hmm.
and they've had some severe flops and
Mm-hmm.
disappointments at the box office, and part of that has to do with the fact that they've drifted away from the core principles and the core foundation of the company, and
Mm-hmm.
how some of those, how the animated films have been made and should be made.
Mm-hmm.
They're becoming overmanaged. They're becoming as if it's just a factory making widgets, You know, and that's just not, you know, that's just not a good thing. And you know, when they're spending 150 and 200 million dollars to make a movie,
Hmm.
you know, that's an awful lot of money to be flushing down the toilet, because that's what they've done with a number of films in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And you can only do that for so long, you know, before somebody has to turn the you know, turn the operation on its head and shake it a few times to
Yeah.
kind of try and figure out, like, why is this happening?
Like the
And
Nintendo game console, we used to hit the hell out of it and
yeah,
restart the but no, that's really true. And that's
yeah,
something you that's some really great insight, to be honest, you
yeah.
know?
But you know, again, I I don't want to leave on a downer note. I
We're
would
not leaving
sit there.
anywhere, Dave.
Yeah,
Where
I
you
know we're
trying to
not.
go, boss man?
Yeah, I all I would say is that, you know, you're going to encounter all kinds of isms out there. You know,
Yeah.
when you go out into the world, there's ageisms, there's racism, there's all kinds of isms,
Yes.
and it's really about how you uh you know, deal with them and approach those things and go beyond those things,
Hmm.
because it's all within yourself. And you can sit there and make excuses. Oh, I didn't get the job because I'm too old, or I didn't get the job because I don't look like the boss, or
Yeah.
I didn't get the job because of this, or they don't like my kind of you know, heritage. They don't like my religion. What you could sit there and make excuses all you want,
Hmm.
but that doesn't amount to a hill of beans. You
Keep
have to
fighting.
you have to go beyond that. You have to
Keep
let
fighting.
that stuff roll off your back. And I know it's tough. I know it's tough for people to do that, but you have to move forward in a positive way, and just do it. You know, when I sit there and say, "Oh, uh I'm going to do this book," I go and do the book. I don't say someday I'm going to do a book, because guess what? In the 7 days of the week, there's no someday.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's a
There's no
Sunday, there's a
someday.
Saturday, but there's no someday. Okay.
Yeah,
And the thing about it is that if you want to do something, you can make it happen. You can make it happen. And it
absolutely.
may be tough to do, but you can do it. And
And
plenty of people
I
have.
love that you mentioned that, because there's something, a theory that I have, that's like the talkers versus the doers.
That's right.
Hang with the doers, not
Yeah.
the talkers. And you know, even with going to the racism and diversity, you know, me as a Black woman, I've definitely faced that, right? But there were times where I set myself up to where they couldn't kick me out.
Mm.
You'd have to drag me out the building because I got
Yeah.
my toe in the door.
Yeah.
And once my toe is in the door, I move my foot in, my leg, my
Mm.
ankle, my whole body, my shoulder, and I made sure that I was a reflection of my people in a way that they felt comfortable enough to start hiring more of us.
Yeah.
You know, there were times where it would just be me on a team for many years.
Right.
And I did enough, and I convinced them enough to hire more of us. And I feel like with my community, we just need to get more at those positions of executives. You know, we
Right.
don't we concentrate too much on sometimes the acting portion or being on the crew, but to really make change, we have to move forward and
Yeah.
get in those positions of, you know, hey, we're green lighting this major motion picture film.
Yeah.
We're
And,
green lighting this blockbuster, and it's not just a concentration on one race. It's like
right.
diversity is everything. It's about the story, and
Yeah,
that's what I hope we get.
and it's hard,
It's very hard.
and there's obstacles, but you have to
A lot of them.
persevere. And I do want to tell you one story about Walt Disney, because this is a great story, right?
Go for
So in the 1920s, he started doing a new character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And
it.
and he thought that he owned the character, but he didn't. His producer and Universal, the distributor, owned the character, right?
Wow.
And so he finished the first 26 cartoons, and he went to New York to say to the producer, Charles Mintz, I want more money for the next group of cartoons.
Mhm.
I want to pay my artists more and all of that. And unbeknownst to him, Charles Mintz has signed away a lot of his artists
Wow.
behind his back and set up his own cartoon studio, the Oswald Cartoon Studio,
Wow.
in Hollywood. And he told Walt, not only are you not getting any more money, you're not doing any more of the cartoons. And Walt was like, well, I'm gonna go shop them around. And they're like, you can't. We own the character. And
Wow.
so from that was a huge blow to Walt Disney. But guess what? On his train ride back, and I'm kind of paraphrasing this and cramming it all together, but
No, that's fine.
on his train ride back to Hollywood from New York, he developed a new character, Mickey Mouse. And so out of adversity, the guy got knocked down. He had a character taken away from him that he
Mhm.
never owned. He couldn't, he was going to not have any work at his studio once he finished the first 26 of the Oswald cartoons. And instead of belly aching, because he could have easily gone and sat on a bar stool and just bitched and moaned to a bartender and cried to anybody who'd listen to how he got screwed over.
Yeah.
Instead, he developed Mickey Mouse, and he went and created the first 3 Mickey Mouse cartoons, and they took off like a rocket.
And I
And
don't know
so
about no Oswald
yeah,
character. I don't know where
and
that
yeah,
rabbit is today.
and yeah, but and in hindsight, you sit there and go, that was a pivotal moment. This is a guy that got knocked down, and he picked himself up, and he took that life lesson, and he said, going forward, I'm going to own all my characters. So he owned Mickey Mouse. And
That's
all the
so
characters that came after that, he made sure he owned those characters and didn't have to. And there you have it. I mean, that's what the Walt Disney Company was founded on, that kind of tenacity. So I would just tell people, if you get knocked down, if you have a disappointment or something, you just pick yourself up, learn something from the moment, but pick yourself up, move forward, and
yes.
that's what we all should be doing.
That's what we all should be doing. And that's one thing that I would say with my friends. I tell them, just don't move in fear. Something like this, the conversations with filmmakers that you're on right now, Mr. Dave the Bossman. To say really quickly, I love that name. Listen, you're gonna be calling
Well,
yourself.
so it's so funny because over the years, so many people have called me boss or boss man. It's
I'm
like
saying Dave the Bossman.
it's
I'm
just a
putting it.
natural.
Yeah, it's just natural. I'm putting it together. You was born in Queens anyway, so you're a fellow New Yorker. Even though you lived out in Long Island, blah blah, Brooklyn, Queens. I was born in Brooklyn. You were born in Queens. We know Brooklyn is better, of course. But to go
I'm not.
back to
I
it
won't
though,
argue with you.
yeah. To go back to it though, sometimes you just got to create your own lane, right? And I
Yeah,
think that is a really great point that you're making.
yeah.
But let's segue into another section and everything. Are there any projects out there now, you as a former animator, would you have loved to work on?
No, because my life
Or
is
do you
always.
read more than you watch
No,
now?
no, because my life has just been a continuous evolution, you
Hmm.
know, of learning, of doing new things, of constantly always what is the next thing after this,
Hmm.
It's like I'm 100%, 150% focused on whatever I'm doing at the moment, but I also in the back of my mind know what the next thing is going to be,
Hmm.
and what is it that I want to do. And so, for me, there's no projects that I would have said, oh, I wish I had worked on that, because
Hmm.
I didn't work on those. And when I the last feature film that I really had a big hand in was Fantasia 2000.
Hmm.
And I kind of look at that as my last feature film, because after that I evolved into a special projects unit, and a creative director role in that special projects unit, and then eventually heading up that special projects unit. And that was so much fun for me because I was able to then work on theme park attractions, and I could do stuff
Oh,
for Dancing with the Stars on ABC, and I could work with publishing or with the games division, or all of these different divisions of the company I was able to do work with. And so I was exposed to a lot of different disciplines, a lot of new things, and met a lot of
learning.
new people, and I was
Hmm.
constantly learning stuff. And
Hmm.
then some of the projects were things where we were as a team inventing something new,
Wow.
and so to be part of that was exciting. And it was you're stretching your boundaries, you're stretching your knowledge base,
Hmm.
you're trying things, you're learning things that are new. And I think that to me was very exciting, and it was part of my evolution, of my career evolution.
Hmm.
So I don't look and go, oh, I wish I worked on something. I have seen some films that, recently, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
Yes.
Turtle Mayhem,
Hmm.
which I just think is absolutely fantastic. I
I know
love the visuals of the movie. I love the script. The storyline moves along at a very good pace.
that. Hmm.
It's an exciting film, and I sit there and go, good on you to the filmmakers
Hmm.
for stepping out beyond the boundaries and doing new things visually that
Hmm.
I think are just fantastic from a filmmaking standpoint. But do I wish I had worked on the movie? No, I don't think so. I don't want to be I don't want to be in that rat race anymore.
Yeah, he's like, no, 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 no. I'll just
I
watch from a
I
distance.
I want to go buy my ticket and go enjoy it at the end when it's finished.
Yes. I know one of my favorites is Love, Death, and Robots. That's another one as well. They take a whole bunch of shorts and stuff. So no, but that's really good. But
Yeah.
can you talk to us more about any books that you're currently working on or any projects
Well,
that you're currently?
I've got two books coming out. I've got Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas visual companion that's coming out on September 26th.
Oh, nice.
Um, and that is sort of a making of that film. It's a
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes look at how that film came to be. And then I have another book coming out on October 17th, and that is The House of the Future, Walt Disney, MIT, and Monsanto's Vision of Tomorrow. And
Oh,
and
wow.
so, both of those books were really, every book I do is a passion project. It's
Yeah.
something that I really wanted to do. So the Nightmare Before Christmas book, actually Disney Publishing asked me if I'd be interested in writing it, and then I told them, I said, hey, you do know I worked on the movie? And they said, oh no, we had no idea. And I said, well, I did. I worked on the movie, so I'd love to tell this story, because I know a lot of the people on the film. So that was a fun project, and I actually wrote that for the 25th anniversary, but there were some production delays and
Mhm.
scheduling delays, and then the pandemic hit, and they just said, well, we'll put it out for the 30th anniversary, because Disney loves anniversaries and celebrating different anniversaries. So it's coming out this year for the 30th anniversary, and then my House of the Future book was already in the pipeline to be published for this year. So I'm fortunate to have two books coming out this year. But
Congrats.
I have book projects stacked up out to like 2030, 2031,
Wow.
because I just sit, and we talked about it earlier. I don't sit and say, gee, I wish I could do something, write something about such and such someday. I
Yeah.
sit there and say, oh, that's a really cool topic. I want to write something on that. And I put it on my list of things to do. And then I just start doing research on it, and I start gathering materials. And then at some point, you sit there and go, oh, okay, I'm going to write that book, you know?
Mhm.
And I'll tell you something funny, because all of my books are kind of serendipitous. You know, they just
Why?
kind of, they organically spring, you know,
Mhm.
and for more than 30 something years, I take a personal retreat up to Maine for a week or two. Usually it's 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And I take a class at a seasonal school on the coast of Maine. And I
Wow.
do things like crazy things, like make a pair of oars. You know, I don't even own a boat, but I made a pair of oars because I wanted to learn how to do something like that, you know?
Mhm.
And I've taken all these different classes over this 30 years or so, that 32 years I've been going up there. And part of that has been expanding my creativity, and sort of being by myself, thinking thinking about the past year,
Mhm.
thinking about what I want to do for the coming year, and
Mhm.
setting some goals for myself. And,
Absolutely.
and I can tell you, I have a notebook on my bookshelf here. I could pull it off and open it up to a page, and there's a list of books I wrote 10, 12 years ago that I said, oh, I'd love to write these books, right?
Wow. The
I want to
vision board.
I want to write these books, and I've crossed off like 2/3 of the titles I wrote down. Now, they're not the exact same titles, you know, the titles
Of
have evolved
course.
and changed, but the subject matter is the same.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
like a
I
vision board. You had your own, like, almost like a
yeah,
vision board, a
yeah,
list of.
but it was my list, and I just keep adding to that list of things I want to write about, and I kind of feel like I know that when I finish one project, I'll get to the next. Anyway, long story short, people that I know over the years knew that I went to Maine by myself every summer for a couple of weeks as a personal retreat to kind
Yes.
of just unplug from everything. And I would say to my assistant, when I was still at Disney, I was taking like 2 and 3 weeks sometimes. I would
Yes.
say, the first week I'm winding down, so I might answer some emails.
Mhm.
I said, the second week, consider me dead. Don't reach out to me.
You damn right.
And then the third week, I'll resurface at my own pace. Okay. So if you hear from me, you'll hear from me. If you don't reach out to me, So anyway, I had some people over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, people would say, yeah, you ought to write about that and everything. Anyway, long story short, I wrote a 50,000 word book on finding your happy place. It's called Find Your Happy Place, 8-step guide to expanding your creativity on a personal retreat.
I love
and
that.
and so I'm in the process of going through the editing on that, and I have more work to do on it, but that's probably going to come out towards the end of next year. And that's just my process of going and doing my thing, and how I explain it in 8 simple steps that anybody can do. And
Mhm.
you don't have to fly across the country and go someplace. You could do this on a weekend by yourself, and you could go to a local park with a chair and sit and follow what I've done over 30 plus years. and and I guarantee it will help to clear your mind. It'll help to expand your creativity, and it'll help you to focus on goals and things that you want to accomplish,
I love that.
because it's worked for me.
I love that.
It's worked for me. And so, I, again, somebody said, gee, you should write about that. Well, I sat there and thought to myself, yeah, I should. I'll write about it because it's worked for me. Maybe it'll work for other people. Maybe it'll help other people. And, but the thing about it is, all these things require you to do work. and it's all about what's inside you and your ability to do it. And the people who have excuses, well, I can't do that. Well, look at your week. How much time are you watching TV? How much time are you playing games on your phone? How much time are you, doing other things than working towards a goal you want to accomplish?
Absolutely. And
So,
sometimes too, it's like that's a way to take care of yourself mentally and physically as well.
yeah.
It's like unplugging and really recentering yourself. So I'm looking forward to that book. Dave, you better let me know when it comes out. I want a signed copy and I need your address so I can give you the thank you note, mail it over there. No, but next time I'm in LA, we definitely have to link up and everything.
Absolutely, I would do it.
You are tuned in to Conversations with Filmmakers podcast. Now, a word from our sponsors. We are proud to present Who Nation TV Plus, a worldwide urban TV, movies, culture, and entertainment platform available on the Roku and Fire TV networks. Download the Who Network app on the Google Play Store and join the Who Nation social community for true freedom of speech and expression with friends and family today. Or visit whonetwork.com. That's Who, H-O-O Network. Thanks everyone, and we are so happy to be sponsored by them. Hi there, and welcome back to Conversations with Filmmakers podcast. All the things that you've done and all the work that you've made, you've mentioned about decompressing, and I think that's something important for the audience to know.
You have to have
you
time for
have
yourself.
to. It is
You-
easy
yeah.
to burn out in this industry, especially if you're on crew. I'm sure with you as well, when you were an animator and VFX and all that, you're working 10, 12, sometimes 35 hours. Who knows? I remember that somebody had told me before with Lord of the Rings, they were rushing to get the editing done. It was almost done when the films come out and they ran into some complications. So people were like really going overboard to get that film out there. So if anyone is listening, make sure you take that time and recenter yourself.
Yeah, you really do. You really have to focus yourself. You have to pick and choose your battles. You have to know what your boundaries are. Because if you don't set your boundaries, there are bosses out there that are going to trample all over you. They're going to dump stuff onto you, and you have to set your boundaries and say, I'm not going to be here past 6 p.m. because I'm coming in at 6 a.m. or whatever it is. I worked with a director once who was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he observed the Sabbath, which is Saturdays, right? So from sundown on Friday evening until sundown on Saturday evening, he didn't do any work whatsoever. And so during the winter, when the sun is going down at 4:30, 5 o'clock, he left and went home. It didn't matter what was going on. We could be in the heat of production, and everybody accommodated him because those were his boundaries. He said, this is what I do, and everybody respected that. And if you don't say this is what I do and these are my boundaries, you'll get trampled, and you'll burn out very quickly.
Burnout. There's a time, like you mentioned, when you do say yes, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, can you get this done? But then there's also those boundaries as well.
Yeah.
That was something that I would do even if it was my lunch hour. I didn't care if I was sitting at my cubicle and you walked up to me on lunch. I just looked at you and you knew I'm on lunch.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing I'm entering right now. Come back.
Yeah, exactly.
But it gave me that reboot. It didn't matter. I
Sure.
didn't need to run outside every time. I wanted to sit at my desk, get my chi on for that 1 hour just to myself. So I really wanted to thank you for joining me. And, you talk about being fearless, and I spoke to you yesterday about this. Listen, Warner Brothers and Discovery, call me because your girl got a Superman script for you. And I already told Dave about it and he knows that, but it's thinking outside of the box, taking everything out of it and just saying, we are here and we are creatives. And I love being able to talk to a writer today, because you are a writer. And I know that came very quickly. And I also respect that you took the time to get the education and to actually learn the craft. There
Yeah.
are writers out there, you don't have to take these courses and all that. It does come naturally, right? But then there's other times that respect what we're doing and respect the craft, you know?
Yep.
I
Yep.
think it's awesome. What I want to know as my last question,
Hmm.
what the hell happened to that tin chair, man? Who got it? Did someone inherit the
Well, yeah. You know something? It's really funny. I'll tell you a quick history of those chairs. So, it's
Okay.
called an airline chair. Okay,
Airline.
two words, airline chair. It was designed by a mid-century industrial designer and architect named Kem Weber.
Mm-hmm.
And the studio had purchased, I think, close to 300 of those chairs from Weber when he designed the Disney studios in Burbank.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, by originally the chairs were covered in cloth, but the cloth wore out fairly quickly, so they had them reupholstered with automobile naugahyde upholstery, right? All
What?
right, yeah. So it's like leatherette, and and so the artists, the animators would have those in their offices, but by the 1960s they kind of people felt like they were outdated.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't vintage furniture yet, and so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them got stacked up in the basement of the animation building in the 60s, and then in the 70s they started kind of coming out of the basement. Artists wanted to have them in their offices and stuff. Anyway, it turned out that those airline chairs were highly collectible, and
What?
a number of them sold for $25,000 a piece at auction. So all of a sudden, because they were, they had a provenance to them now, and they were, part of the mid-century design movement, which is very popular again.
Yes.
A lot of the executives wanted those in their offices. So they wound up tagging them all with a barcode, and they
Oh
do
wow.
an inventory once a year to keep track of them, because of the 300, there might be 190 or so left, because
Wow.
over the years some of them walked off,
You damn right they faded
because
off.
nobody thought they were of any value. Now they realize there's a tremendous amount of value to them. So
Wow.
that's the story of the airline chair. So when I was leaving the studio, I had a Kem Weber animation desk, which, by the way, I'm
Wow.
sitting at right now. It's made in 1939.
What?
And
We gotta
they
see this desk.
they came into my office and they said, "Would you like your desk? Would you like to take the desk with you?" And
Yeah.
I thought to myself, "Are you out of your mind? You don't know what you're giving away." And then I smiled and said, "Oh, I'd love this, but how would I get it to my house?" And they said, "Oh, don't worry. We'll have the studio movers take it up to your house for you." And then I immediately went and looked over at my airline recliner chair in the corner. And the person from operations looked at me with a smile and said, "No way, you can't have that."
You're like, yeah. Tag it, put a post-it note on it. This is moving as
Yeah.
well.
So anyway, that's my funny story about the airline chair. There you have it.
So let me ask you, if you could, would you do it all over again? If you could have a
Yeah,
Benjamin Button moment, would you be like,
absolutely. I mean, I have no regrets on how my career went, and how I where I am now, and the books I'm writing, and I'm having a ball. I really am. I feel like, retirement isn't in my vocabulary.
yeah,
I sort of have the Clint Eastwood philosophy. I wake up every morning and I'm not going to let the old man in. you
I
know.
love that.
And so, you know, I feel youthful, and I feel, you know, I've got a lot of energy to do a lot of different things, and
Mhm.
I'm just going to continue to do those things. And I just love it because there's always something new, and it's the journey, it's the continuation of the journey, it's the
Mhm.
adventure that I've been on for decades. And I have no particular destination to hit. You know, I just keep you know, it really is true what they say. It's not about the destination, it's all about the journey.
Mhm.
And so, you know, for me, everything I've done to date, I'm just incredibly proud of, and I'm thrilled with, and I just love where I am and what I'm doing right now. And 10 years from now, I may be doing something different. Who knows? You know?
And there's no time limit on it. Ain't no
No.
expiration
Yeah.
dates. We're like damn Twinkies, okay?
Yeah. Yeah. You
No
know,
expiration. It keeps
listen,
going.
you know, the one thing that I think seriously is you got to do something you're passionate about and that you love
Absolutely.
doing. You have to spring out of bed every morning. I wake up every morning at 4:30 in the morning. I'm raring to go. I'm like, you know, what's the next thing? What do I have to do? What do I got to do? It's, you know, I'm in my office at 6 a.m. You
Wow.
know, and so I'm excited, and you
Mhm.
have to be excited. If your alarm goes off and you go, oh crap, I gotta get up, and you're
Yeah.
dragging yourself out of bed, man, go figure out something more that you want. So go figure out something better, because if you're just dragging yourself out of bed to go have a miserable day at whatever it is you're doing, you
Mhm.
shouldn't be doing that. You should, you know, life is too short. You got to find the thing that you're passionate about, the thing that you want to have fun with. And I know people are out there probably listening, going, well, that's easy for you to say. You know, I'm struggling to make the rent, or I'm struggling to do that. Well, guess what? You can change whatever it is you're doing, and you can do
Absolutely.
something different. And if that means working two jobs to set up your own business at some point, that's what you do,
Raise
you
his
know?
hand.
Yeah. You know what I mean? If you're, you know, if you're, you know, have a real goal in mind of what you want to do, and you want to try it, and know that you might fail, so what? Big deal. You
At
know
least
what?
you
And
tried it.
that's the biggest fear with a lot of people. You know, when you hear people say, someday I'm going to do that, or I'd love to do that someday, or, you know, any of those phrases, you know, those are people who are never going to do those things.
Mhm.
You
The
know,
talkers
don't,
versus the doers. The
yeah,
talkers versus the doers. I'm
that's
doing a
right.
trademark on that
Yeah.
copyright. Don't take it, y'all. But
You go,
it's so true. It is so
yeah.
true. A lot
You,
of people do that. Yeah.
yeah, you have to set your mind to saying, I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
I want to do that. How do I do that? Figure it out.
Yeah.
Figure it out. You know, you know, how can I go to college? I can't afford college. Go figure it out. There's plenty of programs to help people go to college. You
But like
know,
you mentioned earlier about the chair, right? The 20 something $1,000 chair, right?
yeah,
But you used to sit in that chair and concentrate and really think on story. It's the
yeah,
same thing with people's lives. We got to shut
okay,
down these apps, shut down all of the noise, and really listen to ourselves. What is it
yeah.
exactly that you want out of life? If it is to be an aspiring filmmaker, what can you do today after listening to this to get started, right?
Yeah, and you know, I'll tell you this, when you take a day for yourself, just take a single day
Mm-hmm.
and go someplace. Maybe you go to the beach because the beach is close by. Maybe you go to a local park. Don't go with anyone. Go by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't sit near people. Sit out by yourself, away
Yeah.
from everybody. Okay? And sit there and stare out at the ocean, or stare at the pond, or stare at the woods, you know, and let your mind go, because there's so many people who, every day they're wondering, well, what are they going to think if I say something, or what I shouldn't do that because somebody's going to look at me oddly or whatever. Guess what? I go and sit, and you can laugh out loud, you can cry, you can take a nap, you could do whatever you want without anybody judging you. And that's the important thing here, is to sit in a space, do it for 8 hours, do it for 5 hours, do it for 4 hours, whatever it is that you can squeeze. But go sit by yourself and clear your mind, shut your phone off, stare at the sky, enjoy the afternoon, and let your mind go free and think about the things that you want to think about without any judgment,
Without any judgment. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I love that, Dave. All right. So Dave, the boss man, I promise you're going to be calling yourself that. Somebody's going to call you and be like, yo, boss man, let me talk to you. But just from hearing it from this podcast. But I do want to say thank you so much for joining us. I would love for you to say one more time about when these books are releasing. Also,
Sure.
the House of the Future. Could you explain a little bit more and what you're hoping this book might motivate to do as well?
Yeah, the House of the Future was an attraction at Disneyland from 1957 to 1967, and it was really sort of this vision of what tomorrow would be like, and how people might be living. And I never had the opportunity to see the attraction, so what I set out to do in the book is to come as close as possible to touring the house without actually stepping foot in it. And I think I accomplished it, because I think I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I feel like I've really have seen the house, even though I've never walked through it. If people want to read about some of my books or look to see what kind of books I've written, you can go to my website, davidbossert.com. DAVIDBOSSERT.com, davidbossert.com. And it's a fairly robust website, because I've got about 60 articles I've written about different animation, different things in animation. You can see some of those, you can read all that. It's all free material to read. You can see all the books I've written. There's links to where you can get those books. There's free stuff you can send away for if you want a signed book. You can send away for a free book plate or a bookmark or a drink coaster or any of that kind of stuff. So you can always reach out to me if you have any questions. You can reach out to me through my website. So do it. Go to davidbossert.com and check it out.
Dave, the boss man, Bossert, we love you already. Thank you.
Hey, Vonti, it was just such a pleasure to be on your podcast, and I love talking with you. I love talking with people who have lots of energy and big, bright smiles.
Oh, thank you, man. And next time we're wearing army fatigue together, you bring out those army fatigue shoes.
I will. I'll do it. I'll do it.
Guys, thank you so much for joining Conversations with Filmmakers today with Dave the Boss Man, because he's excellent. Check out his website, because this man is a wealth of knowledge. That's your certification right there. He's giving you the access to all the work that he's done. He has oncoming projects that are going to be releasing this year, and a few more all the way up through 2030. This man is writing. He's backed up and writing, and then he's adding more to the list. So guys, come and get this education, definitely. I really wanted to thank you, Dave. You gave us so much insight into your journey and how to mentor education, how you should be presenting yourself professionally, and how to move forward when you're maybe stuck in your career. So that was the actual goal of Conversations with Filmmakers. So I wanted to thank you so much. And
my pleasure.
Out of here.
Thank you.
You've just tuned into an episode of Conversations with Filmmakers podcast. We'd like to thank our guests for joining us and sharing their knowledge. This has been a production of Vonti Pictures, hosted by me, Vonti McCrae, a screenwriter and producer. We'd also like to thank Bad Rabbit Pictures for the animated content and for their upcoming creation of podcast Age of Prophecy, along with our sponsor, Who Nation TV, with all episodes being edited by Mr. Jacob Daly, a director and producer and a man of many talents. Come back next week as this saga continues.